because we want to be taking decisions on a data-driven basis. And what that means is that we need the data to have a transparency on where all the impacts come from. So then we can determine, okay, where are the hotspots in the whole value chain? Is it in the supply chain? Where exactly in the supply chain? Can we do something in the engineering of the products? What can we do? How big of a lever do we have there?
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Sustainability Leaders Show, your go-to podcast for actionable insights from top sustainability leaders worldwide. I'm Max, co-founder of TSC, and I am your host today. The purpose of this podcast is to share the stories from those actually leading sustainability efforts in organizations around the world. In each episode, we uncover unique insights, lessons learned, and practical advice to help you drive sustainability in your organization. And this podcast is brought to you by the Sustainability Circle, the invite-only community exclusively for sustainability leaders. Today, we have the pleasure to speak with Pina Schlombs, sustainability lead at Siemens. Pina leads the newly established sustainability domain for Siemens Digital Industries Software, focusing on driving the realization of customer sustainability ambitions through digital solutions. And together, we are going to explore the question how industrial companies can realize their sustainability ambitions through digital solutions. Pina, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Max, for the warm welcome. Glad to be here.
Pina, I suggest let's directly dive in with one of my most favorite questions, a question that I usually ask everybody coming to the show. It's a question regarding your background on how you actually became a sustainability lead. What actually made you decide to start a career in sustainability?
That actually takes us back to, I think, my early teens, around the time where the film An Inconvenient Truth came out, which I distinctly remember watching with actually my classmates. So we took a school trip to the cinema and all watched the film together. And that had a profound impact on me and really got that itch, that curiosity going in me, and led me to the path on to studying sustainable engineering and then joining Siemens first in the energy management division and then later where I am today to the digital industry, so the software part and branch of Siemens. And yes, luckily today I can focus on sustainability in my role and specifically how software for sustainability can be leveraged in realizing the big ambitions that we have in the industry towards sustainability, because those ambitions are big, the timeline is short, and digitalization is, as I see it, a key not only enabler but also accelerator in realizing those ambitions.
Super cool. Can you tell us a bit more about what you exactly do on a day-to-day basis, and then also maybe a bit more about the team that you are leading?
Yes, sure. So in my day-to-day, I work with companies across the industries, our teams in Siemens internally, basically to understand where the targets that we have are, what do they mean, in terms of how do we operationalize the realization of those targets. And it really always starts with this question of how can we even make the environmental impacts transparent? Right? Because we want to be taking decisions on a data-driven basis. And what that means is that we need the data to have a transparency on where all the impacts come from. So then we can determine, okay, where are the hotspots in the whole value chain? Is it in the supply chain? Where exactly in the supply chain? Can we do something in the engineering of the products? What can we do? How big of a lever do we have there? In manufacturing, do we have like super energy intensive manufacturing processes that we can optimize, or are there resources being lost in the process or waste that we can avoid? So super broad range of points that we can look at. And basically, of course, they are all different from company to company, right? And they need to be looked at, but they also need to be looked at in concert with all the other targets that companies have, right? I mean, even if I look at our own sustainability ambitions, of course, we have quite ambitious net zero targets till 2030. But we also have profitability targets, right? And we also want to expand our business. We want to launch new products. We want to ramp up our ongoing product lines. So there are so many target curves that need or want to be hit in the same time frame. So basically the big picture or the big questions that I'm looking at with my colleagues internally, but also with the customers I work with is how can we enable all those target curves in concert with each other, right? Which system capabilities do we need at which point in time and at which maturity? And because of course, we need to also understand that all those profitability is linked to environmental impacts, is linked to the regulatory pressure we have, and understanding those relations, how time, cost, quality links to regulatory requirements and sustainability targets, and the nature of those relations allows us to determine, right, to be in the driver's seat of where we're heading. Because the challenge that I've often seen companies face is, yes, we all want to be more sustainable and we have some notion of what that means. And depending on the product, we jump into projects like, okay, let's change the materials. Let's change, use bio-based plastics in terms of conventional plastics. But if we take a step back and understand what is the share of contribution that this material actually has on the overall footprint of the product, and then also aggregate that to a company and portfolio level, right? So it's, yes, one product will have for that, the person that is responsible for that product, a big impact, right? But if we look at the whole company, of course, there's a whole portfolio of products that needs to be looked at. There's our own operations that we need to take into consideration that all together make up our company's footprint and then pay into the goals that we are setting ourselves. So really working on this differentiated picture of where we need which technologies, and right, there can be software, there can also be automation, there can be hardware, right? So it's not only the software side of things, it's also we call it the OT, so the operational technology that needs to come together. Yes, that's what I do with my team every day. And my team consists basically of people that have sustainability expertise, that have software expertise, but also the operational expertise, right? And then also different industries require different specificities in terms of what characterizes their environmental impacts. So the domain expertise from those industries is also something that we bring or have in the team, and makes up the full breadth of the expertise that we bring together.
Super interesting. And I can really see that you're burning for the topic. For me, actually, as a product person, like coming from a product background right now in the sustainability industry, I can definitely see and also feel this excitement for digital solutions. And I'm very much looking forward actually to this podcast and diving into all of the different industries and how you are leveraging software in order to help your customers. That's super cool. But before we do that, I also know that you are an adjunct professor, right? So what are the courses that you are teaching, and what actually also then asking on top of that, what motivates you in this area?
Yeah. Yes, I'm adjunct professor at the SRH Berlin School of Technology. I teach a master's course, and basically the course is technology management. And within that, I teach a module on sustainability and circular economy, including which new business models can be explored in that arena. And the students that I have mostly have an engineering background and are looking to going into the industry, some into automotive, some more into building technologies, some into electric and electronics. And basically what I take them through is first giving them the context of what does sustainability mean in an industry. And because of course, what I've learned and experienced is that in the private arena, we all think about, act, and concern ourselves with sustainability. But of course, if we take it to a company and business level, the perspectives are different, right? Also the demands and trends and market forces are different, and we need to understand them in concert and how they determine business decisions, but also the opportunities, right, that companies have in taking business decisions in sustainability, and what opportunities there are in terms of new products, new business models, as we said, and also going into new markets. So I take them along this really step by step. What is the context? How can we assess and determine and take decisions based on and taking sustainability and circular economy into consideration? And to your question as to why I do this, I remember being at the TU Berlin is where I studied, and the courses that were focused on sustainability. So I do have an engineering background, but there were distinct courses on sustainability where this is really what got me excited, because this is where I saw how I could make a difference, right? How I can personally have an impact in the business arena, in the industry. So it's basically also sharing that, and then funneling also basically my experiences that I have with talking to customers, the journey that I see us as Siemens going through, and sharing that with students, and trying to get them excited. But usually I don't have to get them excited. It's more actually the other way around, that they surprise me with their enthusiasm for the topic. And they even challenge me. It's like, why don't we go further? Why they thought like we would be so much further along already. It said, sometimes I even have to, I don't want to say rein in their enthusiasm, but maybe infuse some pragmatism or some understanding of the larger you get and the bigger the ecosystem that you work in, the more inertia is also in the system. But that shouldn't dampen their enthusiasm. It also means that you have a bigger lever to make an impact, to take action. So that's why I'm teaching it and what I do.
Those lucky students, I'd say. Very cool. I'd say let's dive right in. You got such an energy right now in the call that I really want to transfer that to our main interview. So the question of today is how companies can realize their sustainability ambitions in specific industrial companies with the help of digital solutions. And that is very broad. And I know that you already did a great explanation of what you're doing with your team, but let's maybe narrow that down right now a bit. Let's try to understand a bit more with what type of customers you are dealing, but then also what kinds of technologies you are also using. So let's maybe start with the customers. What's the customer profile, if there is any, that you are dealing with the most? So for example, size, industry, and then also maybe a bit referring to the current state of sustainability.
Yeah, sure. Maybe taking the points one by one. So what kind of customers am I or is my team working with? It's very broad. Across all industries, basically any industry that is producing something. If you want to look at it in terms of verticals, it's everything in the automotive, in the transportation space, in the energy and utility space, right? We have a big arena of life science, so that is medical technology, as well as pharma, chemicals, then also industrial machinery. This is where, of course, we in Germany have the German Mittelstand very well presented. And so it's really a broad range of companies, and it's not only OEMs, it's also tiers, suppliers. So across the whole value chain, which also makes it quite diverse in terms of the challenges that these companies face, the opportunities they see, and how they also approach sustainability in their strategies and roadmaps. So I think that should give us a good setting for the first question.
Definitely. And right now, let's speak a bit about the technologies that you are actually applying. And then maybe we can actually tie that to some kind of the industries, if there's any kind of pattern that we could find there.
Yes, sure. In terms of I'll start with a general approach that we have, and that is we combine the real and the digital world, like we say, to make the real world better. So that means that we build a virtual representation of the real world we're acting in the digital world first, right? We can model it, we can plan with it, we can simulate, we can validate, we can optimize in the digital world before we take the steps into the real world, to make sure that we have taken every opportunity to consider optimization potentials before we spend any resources in realizing it in real life. Now, being a Berliner, I would have loved for the BER to have been built in the virtual world first. I think we would have gone a lot farther with a lot fewer resources in a much shorter time in such complex projects. But actually, it's a great example because a lot of manufacturing processes are also super complex, right? And they're built to last for a very long time, right? But they also need to be able to adapt to changing demands, right? If I change a product, if I want to introduce a new product line, I need to have a production line that is flexible enough to adapt to that. So everything like that is something that we can completely model in the virtual world first, including the products that are being produced on those production lines. The technology behind this is digital twins, right? That's not something that is very new. It's something that we've been working with for quite some years. But basically, what comes together here is that in this virtual representation of the real world, and again, we're speaking of the product itself, right? If we have my bike here in the back, but also the production lines and the logistics, right? We also need to source certain materials, certain components. All of that can be captured in the virtual world first, and we can explore how they will work together. For instance, again, taking this example of, okay, I want to optimize my product, thinking about maybe for sustainability, I want to choose a different material. The question you can explore here is, okay, if I change the material, which is something that you can easily do in a virtual design space, just swapping the material that is assigned to your 3D model, for instance, but you can then explore and simulate, okay, what implications will this have in manufacturing? So can I still use the same machines with the same parameters to run the production on? You can explore in the supply chain. Can I source that material in the right quality, in the right quantity from the suppliers that I already have? Or do I need new ones? And here we also have capabilities like AI coming in, where we can actually predict the availability of that material into the future based on the demand, how the demand is developing in the worldwide market. So this is, again, also something where I'm super interested and enthusiastic about it right now, is where we see a lot of technologies converging, not only digital twins, we just said artificial intelligence, and there are so many more. So if we go into the manufacturing space, for instance, there's a high usage already today of AR and VR technology. Now, that capability is of so much use in that arena because it can tap into the digital models, the digital twins that have been built before, and can guide, for instance, workers in the shop floor on how to commission a line, or ramp up in skills new workers to teach them how to operate the machinery that needs to be operated on. And so there are so many technologies that come together, that converge, to allow us to capture those complex systems that we work with, right? The complexity of those interrelations, to be able to determine which decision will have which impact, and then take data-driven decisions. Because we already know we can virtually simulate the implications, the cause and effect chains it will have along the entire value chain, and simply not having to build prototypes, simply not having to try out a new product on a new production line. Usually it takes like days or weeks even. And you probably, like, if you crash one of those KUKA robots, they're super expensive. You don't want to do that. You're crashing the robot, plus you're crashing probably the machinery around that. You can all avoid that by having it modeled in the virtual world first, and then exactly how the robot needs to run in the real world. So this is something I could go on. There are so many more technologies that come together. One I need to add, it's additive manufacturing. Because specifically in the engineering space, right, again, here the combination of generative design as in the software realm, right, supported by AI, allows us to build products that have even like mimicking biology, right? If you see those generative design created designs, it will look like something like skeletons or something you see in nature. But it also allows us to form completely new shapes, and we are able to produce them via additive manufacturing. Again, here, the combination, the convergence of different technologies allows us to tap into completely new realms. And coming back to what we said at the beginning, that the timeline of realizing sustainability ambition is so short, and the scale of impact that we need to realize so big, these converging technologies is actually what allows us to take those leaps, right? Not only like step by step, but take leaps into that towards those directions and targets.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Right now, with all of the new AI capabilities, we can actually double down on all of those technologies that we already had before and really use it in order to be more resource efficient and to, actually really build a world first digitally and try stuff out before we, use the resources and then do it physically. That's cool. And I think you already answered my next question, because I really wanted to know right now, having you such an expert in the call, what is the emerging technology that gets you the most excited? Is it generative design, or is there anything else that comes to mind right now?
It's really what's behind generative design is a combination of classical design software and AI. Yeah. And even in that space, I mean, in design, 80% of a product's environmental footprint is determined. So for me, it's super exciting that we have so powerful tools today to make the biggest leaps in that stage of the design process, of the product development process. What I'm super excited about, of course, is AI, right? Because it's a technology that gets infused into all our technologies, speeds them up tremendously, but also democratizes lots of technologies, right? So for instance, if we stay in the engineering space, we've been able for years, maybe even decades, to simulate very complex phenomena, right? With multiphysics behind that. But that's been a domain that is very exclusive to simulation experts. So you really needed to know, basically, there's lots of doctoral students of physics that are in that domain, because till to date, you needed to have that deep expertise in physics, but also in simulation and how you can capture both in a virtual domain. Today, with AI, it allows us to create models to simulate without having to be a simulation expert and a PhD doctorate, right? So it democratizes these powerful technologies to answer questions in a much broader scale. So we have large engineering teams that today are able to explore much larger design spaces because we've infused the design software that they're using with AI, right? So this is just one example, right? And if we go into the shop floor, also there, basically those machines, they have like their own language that you need to program them in order to work. Today, you don't need to be someone that even can code, right? You can put in natural language. There is a copilot, industrial copilot that translates what you're saying into something the machine can understand. And voila, you have the running machines, right? So it's applicable on so many different domains. It speeds things up. It scales things up. And it also, and this is something I'm also very excited about for my students, because just yesterday I was asked, what skills do I need to have to enter this domain in the industry for sustainability, especially in the interconnection of sustainability and digitalization, where I was super happy to say you don't need to have a lot of skills because the hurdle to enter that space has been broken down by so many levels through AI. And I think we're not even at the beginning of what AI can do. And I think it's more the boundaries of our imagination currently that build the barrier as to what we can foresee and imagine it doing. But yeah, so this is a field I'm super excited about.
The opportunities definitely are huge. And of course, we need to be cautious, right? Because AI still also uses a lot of computing power, and computing power also has a footprint, actually a pretty huge footprint. But anyway, we have those opportunities. The market right now gets democratized. And I'm very sure that we can also then bring that computing power that needs to be used down, and therefore also the footprint in the long term. And we as technology enthusiasts, of course, we could go on and speak another 30 minutes about that. But I think that's enough for now, because what I want to get into right now is, of course, this new world sounds shiny, so many opportunities ahead of us. But what are the actual challenges that companies that you are working with are dealing with when implementing such new technologies? Can we explore that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. They're quite varied. And the challenges that I mostly see is, as we talked about in the beginning, you'll start with establishing transparency about where you stand, basically a baseline, right? But even there, you can have a baseline if you have the data to compile the baseline. And this is where mostly the biggest challenge in the first step already lies, right? That there are a lot of companies out there that also through the diversification of their value chain, right? They work with engineering providers, a lot of partners who build parts of their product or their solution for them. But that got them into the conundrum where they today don't even have the full picture of what's in those components that they're buying, purchasing, to putting together, to assembling to their final product. Meaning that they only have the limited transparency into what the status of the environmental impact of their products actually is. And the same goes for the production, right? The topic of energy efficiency in production is not that new, but we've mostly been looking at whole production sites. Usually a company will know, okay, this production hall uses XYZ kilowatt hours per month or something, right? What they will not know is, okay, well, this exact machine uses this amount of kilowatt hours to this exact operation. But this is the granularity of data that you need to get to be able to determine where you need to optimize, right? And crucially, it's also the granularity of data that you need to get to in order to determine, okay, what's the quality of the products that are being produced on those machines at the end of the line? Because the health of those machines determines the product's quality, right? And there's all kinds of basically health insights that we can get from the machine level to predict what the quality of our products are going to be, but also when those machines are going to fail, and even prevent them from failing or having maintenance routes before that to prevent that. So in all arenas, it's basically the lack of data, or if they have data, they don't have the right context. They cannot determine the quality and if they can trust the data. So it's really this super heterogenic picture of availability. And then if you go to the supply chain, it's super complex because most companies have a very deep supply chain. And if you want to gain transparency on that, even for us, it's hundreds of thousands of suppliers. Of course, we've been trying to get a transparency on that on our suppliers for a long time, but I would not say that we are nearing 100%, right? It's a very heterogeneous picture, but this also shows that in terms of gaining transparency and collaborating on sustainability, it's an ecosystem play, right? So even us as Siemens, we need to collaborate with our suppliers, also our customers, work together. And this really starts with exchanging the relevant data in a standardized format that everybody in that value chain can work with. So that's also everything basically centered around heterogeneity, availability of data, and the consistency of those data. This is like one big area of challenges I see. The other one goes back to one of the points that I made in the beginning, that we're very accustomed to and very good at building silos in our big companies. And sometimes we start with sustainability in the same way. We establish a new team, it gets their mission and they're off. But usually they then lack the interaction and the exchange with the other teams, right? With engineering, with the production teams, with supply chain teams, and crucially also with finance, to be honest, and compliance, right? Because we've established sustainability also in my team as a horizontal, precisely because we see it as touching every point of the value chain. And as I said at the beginning, we need to understand how sustainability interrelates with our other targets, right? With all our operations, all of our business activities, because otherwise we will try to optimize some point, but it might only I talked to a pretty big company at a conference last year. They had this big sustainability project running for 2 years that everybody was super excited about. It got super big attention in the entire company. And at the end, they realized that they had been trying to optimize something that only made up 0.1% of their overall footprint, which of course was something okay, everybody poured their hearts into it, was super enthusiastic, but it did not make much of an impact because the step beforehand, identify what contributes to my footprint, understanding those contributions, and then also being able to determine how do I best go about optimizing them. Because they're interrelated, I can smartly, intelligently build chains and use synergies amongst them. But I can only do that if I have a holistic understanding about my value system and about the system lifecycle. So those would be the top two challenges that I see companies facing.
Very interesting to actually hear that you find this as a recurring pattern of challenges, that really the wrong thing actually gets optimized, right? And so many resources and so much enthusiasm then also could have been saved by just taking the first step and thinking about, okay, where do we have actually the biggest levers? So what would you advise? Is there some blueprint that you could also give? And that's very oversimplified, right? But is there something that companies could do better in order to overcome, especially the second pattern of challenges?
They're tied together really, but the approach that we also follow internally, to be honest, is that because we set so high targets in such a short time frame, we said, okay, we cannot take a trial and error approach. We simply don't have the time for that. So we said from the beginning, we're taking data-driven decisions on how and where we optimize. And I think this is really the first thing that I would share, how to avoid those pitfalls, right? Because if you have transparency, you have a clear picture of where you stand and then deduct from that. Of course, just having the picture is the one first step that you absolutely need to take, in my opinion. Identify the hotspots. It's really straightforward until that. I think the more complex part is understanding the interrelation between how each step of the value chain links to each other, right? What are the cause and effect chains between that? And then crucially also, as I said in the beginning, how does it relate to my profitability? How does it relate to my regulatory pressure, to the market pressures, to what my customers are demanding of me? Where do I want to take the company? In which direction? what position in the market do I want to take up? So it really goes back to having this holistic understanding of my whole system lifecycle. And there's this approach of systems thinking and systems engineering. This is something that that methodology we apply also to business engineering, as we call it, to have this integrated holistic approach where you model all the aspects that determine how you do business, including incorporating sustainability and then looking at it all together in concert with each other. This is something that, from an approach perspective, I would say is the most promising route to take.
Cool. So for somebody who just wants to get started, then this is basically the blueprint on how to actually do it. And I'm very sure that you can also reach out to Pina if you have any kind of question in that regard. And right now, I want to hear a success story. So somebody who actually did it right. Is there anything that you can maybe share from one of your most favorite projects that you did, for example?
Well, you always say like drink your own champagne, but also eat your own dog food, right? So I'll share a story from our own. The story of Siemens of transforming towards sustainability actually started years ago. And even in our big corporate world, it did start with like grassroots initiatives, people in all corners of the company kicking off something that they felt was important to them, right? Making a difference in terms of our environmental impacts, but was contributing to, of course, the overall story. I think one thing that for me is one of the biggest wins, to be honest, is that our head of sustainability office realized that the digital transformation is our biggest lever to pushing and enabling our sustainability transformation. And I do think it really ties together with, we simply didn't have any other option if we are to hit our targets. But that has spurred so much change also on the digitalization front. And the synergies are simply, I think they're much bigger than anybody had anticipated. And I see this every day. I work very closely with our engineering teams. So these are our targets, our company targets, and we have all the requirements that we have from regulatory directives. Then we have put into that funnel what our customers are demanding of us, and basically like build this whole requirements funnel and linked it into a process of how we can operationalize it into the engineering processes that we're already using. And this is an approach that we have taken also in all the following steps of the product development process. In the engineering space, then, all our design engineers have been equipped with the capability to take decisions towards sustainability through the systems, the digital solutions that they use every day, and they're accustomed to using. For me, the biggest win here is that through this approach, we've been able to scale sustainability action across our organization and really do that also at a speed I think that even we did not foresee. I think just yesterday we put out a press release that we are taking the timeline ahead of our sustainability commitments in our own operations, because we've just simply have been moving faster than we anticipated. And I think it's really down to this approach to really head on diving into digital transformation and leveraging the synergies for sustainability transformation.
Super cool to hear what actually is possible when everything happens coordinated. And yeah, what is possible? We already talked for 45 minutes already, and I'm very sure we could go on with that. But unfortunately, it's already time to wrap things up. I can just say thank you so much for giving this great overview about the industry, about what you are doing, and then also especially the challenges as well as the technologies that you are using. Any kind of final last words that you want to give our listeners on the way if they are dealing with the implementation of digital industry solutions or actually want to get started?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much, Max, for this opportunity. And Jonas, of course, as well. You two guys from the sustainability circle here make all this possible. So the final words, I would just encourage everyone to just get started. Digitalization and sustainability can seem super abstract and also super complex. It's a environment that is evolving very dynamically, right? Currently, the New York Climate Week is happening. There's lots of new aspects, lots of new news coming up every day, but just tap into that, embrace the dynamics of it, embrace that also you can change it, right? The ambiguity also for me holds the biggest potential because there's so much that we can determine. We always say like, well, climate change is man-made and well, it's also bad, but the upside of that is climate change is man-made and we can change it. So take that to heart and see how you can contribute. And even if it's learning something every day.
Yeah, some very great famous last words. And I can just say, not only get started, but of course you're also not alone. We exactly started the Sustainability Circle because of that reason. We are about to also start groups for manufacturing as well as information technology where people, sustainability leaders can meet and exchange with like-minded peers. And with that, Pina, thank you so much for joining us today. I had really a lot of fun and I definitely learned also a lot. To anyone who's listening, thanks so much for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. And yeah, see you next time at the Sustainability Leaders Show. Thanks.